Hello, hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Well, guys, I am blessed to have two illustrious guests joining me today. We have two of my favorite people. Number one is Deb Philman. Deb has been on the channel before. She is a teacher and a mom and a homeschool advocate, and she has a wonderful YouTube channel that if you are interested in what's going on in education, you need to subscribe to Deb Philman's YouTube channel. It's called The Reason We Learn. The link is in the description below. I have learned so much from her and am thrilled that she's here today. And then we also have Justice Graves, who is also a YouTuber. His channel is in the description below. He's been spending some time explaining all this stuff. But Justice is actually really interesting because he is running for his town's school committee. And so he has actually had his head in this nightmare of critical race theory in education for a while now. And so I brought the two of them on together because there's basically a couple weeks ago, Justice especially started sounding the alarm bells. Both Deb and Justice are in my locals community. We do local Zoom calls every single week. And Justice was like, holy hell, you need to be paying attention to this because the Biden administration is making some moves to try to really ingrain and entrench critical race theory in education. And, you know, I've talked several times about how I think we maybe have a couple of years to beat back critical race theory. Well, our timeline just got accelerated based on what I've been hearing from both Justice and Deb. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about the things that we think that everyone with kids in school, or even if you're just, you know, maybe interested in the future of the country, you all need to know exactly what's going on because we can't fight back against it if we don't understand what they're doing. So welcome, Justice and Deb. Thank you guys for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
All right, thank you.
Of course. Well, I just want to start off with a really kind of high-level question. What is going on? What is the big emergency? Explain.
Deb, do you want to start?
Well, okay, to try to keep it simple for people, the Department of Education at the federal level can't really tell schools what to do as far as a national curriculum or even civics education. They can't prescribe. Legally, they can't say, do this. That's not allowed. They can fund things, though. And so the way they get their agenda implemented, if they have an agenda, and they always do, they always have, is they appropriate funds. They ask Congress to give them money for special things. And in this particular case, they want it to be for civics education. Sounds really good, right? And then what they'll do is states will apply for grant money to pay for this civics education. Now, the devil's in the details, as Justice will get into as well, in that they don't prescribe you have to do this very specific curriculum. They set rules and parts of their agenda as to what civics means and what they're trying to, what the grant application needs to do and promise it's going to do and so forth. So if you get this money, if you ask for this money, you're basically saying, I'm going to do what they want me to do. That's why they're appropriating the money. It's just a sort of workaround that they can't literally go in and say, teach this. Is that a pretty good summary, Justice?
So essentially, I'm going to just ask the stupid question. They're essentially bribing schools to do what they want them to do that they can't legally enforce them to do. But they can say, we're going to give you a boatload of money if you do the thing we want you to do. So that's what they're doing. They're bribing
little
schools.
Strings attached to the money. So it's got to be spent in these ways to do these things. And we're going to give you the approved definitions of these things. And it's, like I said, it's just, it's a distinction without much of a difference when it comes right down to it. Now you can not apply for the money, but show me the governor or show me the Board of Education out there, even in a red state, that's going to turn to their population and want to deal with explaining why they're not going after some of this $1 billion. And actually now it's more money, right, Justice? So going after this giant pot of money when they're constantly telling their voters, we need more money from the government for education. So what are they going to do? We don't want this money because fill in the blank. No politician's going to want to do that. And if they take the money for civics, they can still, there's one last little fail safe. They can still try to apply for the grant and get the money and not, apply it to those specific priorities. but then they could run afoul of the regulation. So the bill itself is written very vague, but the rule is written very specifically. So it's going to be tough for them to get around taking the money and not buying the stuff we don't want them to buy.
Justice, what do you have to add to that?
What am I? Oh,
What do you have to add?
what I have to add? So, what do I have to add? Sorry, it just buzzed out.
Have to add. Sorry.
So, this is really a two-pronged approach that's going on in the federal government. It's not just the Department of Education that's making this regulation. Congress has to appropriate the money for this. And there are several bills. There's only two that we've identified right now that are creating new allotments of money, new different, pathways for money to go into the Department of Education in order for this to be funded. But those, what just happened?
You're good. You're good. Keep going.
Oh, I'm good. Okay. I'll keep going.
Yeah.
All right. But different allotments of money, and also changing some of the laws to expand it to specifically target elementary schools, just all over the place, just mentioning elementary schools. Yep. That was a great find on some of the pages.
Right.
It was bad.
Go ahead, Dad.
I was just going to say, it's hard to know which comes first, the chicken or the egg. I mean, especially with this particular president, because I think we would all agree that he's not necessarily the captain of the ship specifically, but the Congress does have to appropriate the funds, and Congress has these bills and they sponsors these bills, but it's still the agenda of this administration. I mean, let's get serious. And there are ways to implement the agenda into education. And that's what Justice is explaining, is you can't just do it one way or the other. I mean, the Department of Education has no money. It has to ask Congress for money. Then Congress has to put, has to write these bills and get the money to them. All that they do is they sort of administer it in terms of the grant application process and all that. But Congress makes the laws. Like, they're the ones saying, here's the money and here's what it's for. And then the Department of Education kind of doles it out, right? I mean, so and the person who would be in charge of this, I want to mention this before too much time goes by. Mm-hmm. If Biden gets his pick of the Deputy Secretary of Education, okay, the Secretary of Education, very pro CRT, okay, is Cindy Martin. If she gets confirmed, there are a lot of people in her home district of San Diego who say that there's dirt on her, that she's compromised, and that it's very weird how she went from a failing superintendent up to this position. She would be the person most closely in charge of administering this grant program. That would be one of her core functions as deputy secretary.
When you say compromised, what do you mean?
What I mean is, she was appointed in a closed door executive session, when in California they have sunshine laws like every other state. And if you have a closed door executive session, it's supposed to be for very specific purposes, usually litigation that you're discussing that can't be put out. And to appoint a new superintendent is pretty unheard of. I mean, that's like a weird thing to do in a closed door session. And prior to that, she was just an elementary school principal. Okay. And what people need to understand is the superintendent of a district is like the CEO of the district. San Diego is the 8th largest district in the nation. So to go from principal of an elementary school, no offense to elementary school principals, but to go from that kind of a role in terms of financial management in a strapped budgetary time period to become superintendent of a huge district where there are budgetary shortfalls, and then she's got to make up these shortfalls. And there's some questions as to where did some Title I funds go, because they didn't seem to find their way to the kids that needed them. And yet they didn't go back to Washington. So there's all kinds of cloud around here. There are people who are actively lobbying for her not to get approved, but the media is not covering it. The media is not touching it. And the only reason I raise it is that when I was doing research into how the Department of Education works, I realized that it's the deputy who has more day-to-day administrative stuff with these grants than the head. Mm-hmm. So if you're talking about a program like this, and then you have somebody who let's just say owes her job and the fact that she's may not go to prison. There's also some other allegations. I don't know enough about them, about some potential criminal activity. Then it gets a little dicier. In my opinion.
And we're talking about someone coming out of the San Diego school district too, and that's one of the school districts where a lot of the critical race theory stuff has just reached like levels of absurdity. So I can't imagine that this person is disassociated from that.
They dropped grades. They dropped certain kinds of standards because and a lot of people believe it's to cover up for some of her failures and mismanagement. It's an easy way to hide poor performance if you're not giving grades out anymore.
It is indeed.
So, I mean, there are a lot of question marks around her. And like I said, I want to take up too much time, but I thought I would mention it because she's not yet confirmed. So in addition, at the end of this, to asking you to go publicly comment on this legislation before it's too late, you should definitely also voice your concerns about her, because if it does get passed, this is a person that most people who've ever worked with her say is absolutely corrupt, who would be administering this money.
Okay. So we have a unqualified superintendent from the San Diego school district who might be in charge of administering a grant program in which the federal government is bribing schools to implement the type of civics education that they want them to teach. Do I have that right?
Just about, yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so I'm still tracking. Okay, so what is this civics education? What strings come with the nice little pot of money that they want to hand these schools?
Well, I'll go on it because Deb's talked for a little bit. So currently in the process right now, all that we know is that they want to implement the 1619 project. They want How to Be an Anti-Racist to be inspired into the program. And they want several other issues regarding, media and, media bias input into it. Now, the problem with the federal rulemaking process is that we will not know the exact specificity of the regulation until it goes to final form. So what we're commenting on right now is basically, now what's in that background is leading us to understand that this is definitely their intentions. But until the final product, we're just shooting blind. That's basically just to cover it. They've pretty much held their hand out and said, this is critical race theory, we're going to go for it. But how far they're going to go, we won't know until it's literally over. So it's basically just like a game over button.
To me, the fact that they've already put into the rule, for example, the mention of Ibram X. Kendi by name, the mention of 1619 Project by name, the use of the term whiteness and systemic racism by name. And if you want, I could show you in the language. You want me to show it?
Yeah, let's dig into the rule. Let's actually look at what this is saying. I think you can share your screen to do it.
Okay, let's see. Let me grab this. Let me see if I can make this.
And while Deb is figuring that out, I just want to acknowledge a couple super chats. Reasonability says so many awesome people on one live stream. Thank you for that. And Alexandra Martin, just a thank you to Carlin, Deb, and Justice. Your voices are so important. I love you guys. Also, peeps, have you mounted that like button yet?
All right, so I've got, I think I shared my screen.
I see. Okay, hang on. I need to work some magic.
Okay.
Add to stream. There we go.
Right.
Okay, it's a little small, but we'll walk through it.
Okay, it is kind of small. But up here it says proposed priorities. The department proposes 2 priorities to support and develop culturally responsive teaching and learning, and the promotion of information literacy skills and grants under the American History Civics Education programs. Now, I'm not going to read all of this to you because it is tiny and you'll go blind, but it says things like disproportionate impact on communities of color when we're talking about COVID. It talks about reckoning with systemic racism, urgency of improving racial equity throughout our society, the unbearable human costs of systemic racism, whole of government equity agenda. This is a rule, guys, in Congress. These sound like media talking points, don't they? This doesn't sound like something going to your legislators.
Can I ask a dumb question?
Yeah.
Do they ever define systemic racism?
Not in here, no.
No, of course
No.
not. Why would they?
right? They also say this acknowledgement is reflected, for example, in the New York Times landmark 1619 project. And this in the resources of the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History. And the acknowledgement is of the importance of including all the systemic racism. Now, let me show you the lovely white culture thing that was up last summer at the Smithsonian.
Pulled out?
It did get pulled out, but thanks to the internet, it's still there.
We all have it.
We all have saved it. And while they did take down this charming little infographic that talks about white culture in the United States and includes such thing as punctuality, use of the written word, work ethic, they lump it in with some ugly stuff too, like me-ism and things. But, we still have following time schedules. So this is out there in the internet. You can still find it. But the actual Smithsonian still has... let's see if I can find the Smithsonian. Actually, I'd have to pull that up separately. But the Smithsonian website still does have an entire section devoted to whiteness. And on there, you can see Robin DiAngelo's lovely little face speaking out to all of you. So my point in even bringing this up is that in the rule, where you're talking about things like 1619 Project and the resources of the Smithsonian, that's the kind of resource we're talking about. And then it says, accordingly, schools across the country are working to incorporate anti-racist practices, ding, 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 Kendyism, into teaching and learning, as the scholar Ibram Kendi has expressed. And he does say, he says, an anti-racist idea is any idea that suggests that racial groups are equals in all their apparent differences. Okay, that there is nothing right or wrong with any racial group, except that white people are always racist. Anti-racist ideas argue that racist policies are the cause of racial inequities. Now, that statement right there, guys, in a nutshell, is critical race theory. Critical race theory says, as do whiteness studies, that all racial disparities, racial iniquities are caused by racist policies. It's the one answer hammer and everything's a nail. That's it. If you see a disparity in literacy, math ability, it doesn't matter what it is, a good disparity in terms of, in other words, if there are Asian kids doing really, really well, okay, that's racist against Black people. So it's always going to be racist against African Americans. It's always going to be, even if white students are down below, near, like just above where the Black students are and the Asian students are here, it's still whiteness and white racism causing it. That is critical race theory by another name. Anyway, I will stop sharing. That was what I wanted to show.
Okay.
All right. And I just wanted to add one more point. So I've also been reading a lot of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And one thing I really want to point out that's terrifying, there is no statute that defines anti-racism. The Civil Rights Act of 1965 only defines non-discrimination. There's no such thing as anti-racism. I don't even know they have to define it at some point, whether it goes to the Supreme Court or not. I'm terrified what that conclusion is going to be. It's also in the Green New Deal. I forget what page in line it's on, but it's in the Green New Deal. It's in several of the bills going up through Congress right now, and there's no legal definition in any of the departments.
Legally, we already live in an anti-racist nation in the practical sense that we have civil rights statutes that protect you against discrimination based on race. So if you have evidence that you've been discriminated against based on race, that you have recourse under the law. That by definition is systemic anti-racism. There are laws in place literally to punish discrimination on the basis of race. I don't know what else you really could possibly want in a society where equal under the law is the standard that would be more anti-racist. That is why anti-racist is really the wrong name. What Kendi stands for is discrimination, reversing the discrimination to make up for. Of course, we haven't quantified how much we're making up for from the past, but the allegation is in order to make up for past discrimination that we didn't participate in, that we have to discriminate now in favor of historically marginalized populations, because that will effectively reverse the effects of systemic racism of the past. It doesn't matter. It's still illegal. Under today's current law is as anti-racist as it needs to be. It's just that he doesn't want to call it that because it doesn't work fast enough or well enough or whatever.
Well, Ibram X. Kendi would not have a $25 million anti-racism center at Boston University, my alma mater, if there were laws against it, it turns out.
That's right.
Okay, so I know that this is I'm going to ask you guys to speculate, but okay, so the thing of it is, so for the last couple of years, we've been seeing this trend of more and more schools proactively, without needing to be bribed by the government, integrating critical race theory throughout their curriculum, everything from English to science to math, all of these things, completely reworking curriculums from preschool all the way up through high school, and of course college is just a lost cause at this point. So we already know that this stuff was happening already kind of on its own. And now we've added in that the government is saying, here is a bag of money if you continue to do this. Right. So what do you think that this is going to mean for how critical race theory is going to exist in education?
Oh, I can answer this. This is not difficult. So right now, I will explain my local situation just to sort of gut the playing field, level the playing field. So in my town, we are currently fighting over the school budget right now. Next week, we vote on it. Like literally next week at this, a few hours later tonight, we vote on it. And one of the problems that's happening is that each of the states right now is having problems with how are they allocating funding. And they aren't giving out their grant monies, their ESSER 1s, their ESSER 2s, their ESSER 3 monies. If you don't know what that is, that's the emergency relief money from the coronavirus aid packages. They're not really handing it out. They're not specifying what it can really be used for. It's becoming a very chaotic situation. And the state is increasing how much the towns have to pay into their districts. Every school district, every town that's in that school district has to pay a certain amount into it. So why am I talking about this? Because the rates have gone up. School districts like mine, when this grant money from this proposal goes live, we're going to have to take it because we are already in the hole for FY23 because things have already gone up so dramatically.
Wait. So I have a question. So Deb, I learned from you back in the glory days when Trump was still president, that Betsy DeVos was actually tracking how much of the COVID relief money schools were using. And they actually built a whole website because schools were not using the COVID relief money that they were given. And so the government started tracking it to be like, you guys have only used 30% of the money. You don't need any more money. So why aren't they using this money? They were given giant pots of money. What happened to it?
Would you like to see the giant pot of money where it stands today?
I think so. Yes.
Okay.
I brought it up on purpose. I knew Deb was going to pull it up.
Let's look at this lovely giant pot of money, $67.5 billion with a B. And understand that's elementary and secondary. Okay, so and then you've got 4.2 billion, and this is funds awarded to governors for other stuff, and then 35.9 billion in higher education. So remember, this is all public. This is not for private schools. Private schools don't get this. There are some funds for kids who are, let's say they're they're scholarship kids or they're underprivileged kids who might be using public, and they can apply for it and so forth. But this is really for public schools, including higher ed. So as you can see, awarded, spent, percent spent, okay, and it starts to tell you. So pick a state. What do you want to see in New Hampshire? You want to see what New Hampshire is?
Let's take a look at New Hampshire. Yeah.
Okay. So New Hampshire, total awarded was $340 million, $340,512,205. The total spent is $72,734,000. So as you can see down here, this is the 25.7%.
New Hampshire has only spent 25% of the money that they were given by the government.
And as I understand it, and I wish I could answer the question as to why, but as I understand it, now they're not even apologizing any of the federal government or anybody involved with this. They're sort of like, oh, we have no intention of spending it all this year. This is going to go out across 5 years. We're going to spend this money. So money that was appropriated ostensibly to deal with, care with COVID. Now, in their defense, I'll play devil's advocate here. As Justice just points out, when you have a budget shortfall, it's not going to happen just that year. There's a ripple Okay, so there is a ripple effect in education funding that's going to carry out across years. And if you dumped it all in one year, first of all, you wouldn't have enough places to spend it because you really wouldn't. There's a limited amount you can spend in a year on stuff you need. So the real story is they appropriated too much, in my personal opinion. They just asked, let's just get as much money as we possibly can, and they got it. Okay, now they got to spend it across time because they literally can't spend it all in a year. They don't have any place to put it. I mean, they're not going to give everybody a giant raise. That's not what it's for. There are regulations about how it can be spent, but they also do have budget shortfalls across the years. The only problem is no one is playing watchdog on this. So the big problem that I see as a citizen, as a taxpayer, is this is out there. This is out there to the tune of what did I say? It was $67 billion. And you don't have anyone in the press keeping some tabs on the people who do make long-term projections. If you're the superintendent of a district, if you are the commissioner of education or the president or whoever of the board of education of your state, you do tend to think in 5-year terms. You don't think in just this year. You're supposed to think in terms of like, what's our budget? Because you can't ask for it every single solitary year. So somebody out there in the media, somebody who cares, should be out there going, okay, the taxpayers are now in debt up to their eyeballs. There are people whose entire lives have been turned upside down because you've just appropriated all this money. Oh, and P.S., a lot of schools are still not open. And we were told it was because of money. So any school that tells you they're closed because of money, this is the proof that it's a lie. Okay. Any school but nobody's watchdogging. How is this going to be spent over the next 5 years? This could end up being spent also towards the critical race theorizing of our schools. It could be.
So I want to go to Massachusetts because Justice was just telling us, and I'm just going to I'm going to dumb down the talking points to the very best of my understanding, and then you guys can correct me. So Justice was just saying that one of the reasons that schools would take the critical race theory bribe that the administration is handing to them is because they don't have the money from the COVID relief, and they need the bribe in order to basically function, right? So let's go to Massachusetts, where I see that they have only spent 33% of the money that they were allotted from COVID.
Right.
So where is the other 66%?
And also remember that this, as far as I know, is separate and apart from Title I funds. This is separate and apart from the funds that the federal government appropriates for special ed, for all that, in other words, the federal government is a funding source for programs that are mandates on the states for special needs, because you can't have a law like the IDEA and make it an unfunded mandate. So they give money to the states already to fund these programs for kids with special needs, which, by the way, are not being implemented, and nobody's watchdogging that because, again, as with this, the weird thing about the federal government and money is nobody appears to be responsible for making sure it's actually spent appropriately once it gets trickled all the way down to the schools. So you have a giant pot of money sitting there, schools claiming they don't have enough money. They're going to grab onto this grant money going, well, we got to take it because, needs. And this money has fewer strings. The CARES Act money has fewer strings. This is actually intended to close budget gaps created by the crisis. Mm-hmm. This is less, this has fewer stipulations than Title I money and all these other monies, and even than the Civics Secures Democracy Act.
Okay. So Justice, what is going on, and why don't they have access to this money? Hang on, I'm going to remove this from the screen.
In short, I don't know why they don't have access to this money. So right now we are in debates, I think, in the state to have what's called the ESSER 3 funds. So they're going to do a third round of stimulus money from that pot, but we don't know where it's going to go. Just unlike in Carolyn's state, I have a Republican governor and a super delegation of Democrats in my state house, which makes me want to rip my hair out. Yeah, it's a nightmare. So the Democrats, right now, there was a huge panic, and I'm about to find out probably in a few hours at the next school committee meeting that I'll watch later tonight. But we had a whole freak out because the governor said one thing that the money could be used for, and the House Ways and Means Committee in the state of Massachusetts said something completely different. and we're about to vote on the budget and certify it next week.
Wait, but
yes, that happened.
Why would the House Ways and Means Committee in Massachusetts have to approve what the COVID money is used for?
Because they get the right to appropriate where money goes, because that's how Congress works. Massachusetts is based off of, remember, it's one of the oldest constitutions. How do you think this works? But here's the other problem. The House Ways and Means Committee also determines how much each of the school districts pay, and they have increased what every single school district pays. So not only are they giving us money, they're also kind of taking it away too, because they're increasing how much they're increasing what I would call essentially the taxes on us, basically. So it's a total nightmare.
All of this, I mean, the thing that people need to understand about public schools in America is that it is a giant, unwieldy, like, let's give everyone involved the benefit of the doubt that they're all well-intentioned people. Let's just pretend for a moment we live in fantasy land. Okay. So let's, I know, but let's say, because I know that people go, but you guys are so, you don't know that. Okay. Here's what I do know. Even if they were saints, even if they were the most saintly people on planet Earth, this thing is a beast. It's too big. It's too complicated. It's too unwieldy. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. And to the extent it does, it's going like this. It is just a mess. And we, the taxpayers, have nobody on our side because we don't have a journalistic establishment anymore that gives a rat's ass about any of this. Nobody cares. There's no watchdog group really, or anybody that's just watching the pennies as to where our education dollars are going. And the loudest mouths out there are constantly whining about education not having enough money. And it's that song that everyone believes. Everyone just believes it. It's like, it sounds right. It sounds like it makes sense, but no, it's not correct. It's not correct. There is a ton of money. They have more money than they know what to do with. And I mean that literally. They don't know what to do with it. So what happens is the most opportunistic, politically connected, corrupt people, because they're not angels, figure out all kinds of ways to play with this giant pot of money to solidify their power, to improve their position, to advance their party's agenda in their state. They leverage it as far as extortion, bribes, etc. And they don't even have to be illegal about it. They could just be like, well, I'd really love to give you some of that money, but, I'm going to need some favors from you. So, it works a lot like that.
Okay, good. Well, Miles says, hey guys, thanks Carolyn for this conversation. Justice, still love your name. Sounds like a comic book hero. Smash that like button or mount that like button as we do on my channel. I agree that Justice, your name sounds like a superhero and not in this social justice-y type of way. All right, but okay. So the schools are put in a position essentially of needing to accept this bribe, and I'm not going to call it a grant. I'm going to call it a bribe because that's what it is. It is a bribe. And as a result of that bribe, they then have to integrate anti-racist education throughout their curriculum. But Justice, you said earlier that you're seeing them mention elementary schools in particular. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
So there are two bills in Congress to allocate the money, and one of the bills is called the Civics Learning Act of 2021. In the House of Representatives, it is called H.R. 400. You can read it for yourself. Now, H.R. 400 changes a statute known as the National Activities under Title 20 of the U.S. Codes, Section 6663. So what does that mean? Under that section, that is where they grant money for different civics and history programs. In it, for the diverse areas and graphical locations, they have specifically put elementary schools as an add-on. So it talks about, to go to diverse areas such as rural, urban, and suburban areas, and elementary schools. So they're specifically targeting elementary schools because that's a separate part of that clause. Because in H.R. 1814, which is the Civics Secures Democracy Act, because they all have different names, they are trying to spend more money to authorize what is called the National Assessment. It's something they're trying to So in the states, in order for the Department of Education to know which states are failing in education, they have what's called, it's a national assessment system, essentially. I can't remember exactly what the name is. I'd have to
The
pull up my
National
notes.
Assessment of Educational Progress in Civics and
Yes, that's
History,
what
and
it
they want
is.
it to be in grades 4, 8, and 12. And what they're
Yes.
trying to assess is how well their brainwashing is working, and in its most literal
Yes.
sense.
Yes, Deb's got it right. That's what it is.
Okay.
So just to scare you more, Carolyn. Carolyn.
Carlin.
Bad.
We're gonna get my
Carlin,
name correct, Justice, before the end of this. That's all right. That's all right.
Yeah,
That's
Dr.
all right.
V,
That's all
Dr.
right.
V.
There we go. Janice Zeal says superheroes are metal AF. I agree. So okay. So we have so they're going to institute a nationwide assessment in grades 4, 8, and 12.
They want
to assess how this is all going.
It says using a methodology sufficient to provide accurate state level data on student proficiency in civics and history, disaggregated so as to have statistical significance for every state. So they want to take a real deep dive into which states are we having problems with over here.
I'm gonna ask a really dumb question, because I remember taking standardized tests in school. Like, we had to do standardized tests all the time to assess how we were doing, like, whatever. What happened to that? And, like, why would this assessment be, like,
they have that still. They just want to add civics. Currently, they don't assess how well you're. We don't teach civics to fourth graders. We don't teach civics. The earliest you might get it maybe is fifth grade. You might get a little tiny bit because you have some American history in fifth grade in some schools. Increasingly, you don't even there. But to put it back, to go back to fourth grade now and start talking about this stuff is actually pushing it lower in the grades to have civics. Now, remember something. They haven't read the Declaration of Independence. They haven't read the Constitution. They probably aren't even at a reading level yet to understand it. And they certainly don't know cursive. So they can't read it in its original form. They're going to be reading whatever somebody else wrote down in plain English for them to read is the Declaration or the Constitution. And that's going to then be translated and digested for them, because you and I both know that a fourth grader, the average fourth grader, especially if English is not their first language, is not really going to understand 90% of what the heck it says, because they don't understand their rights or anything yet. They're just little kids trying to learn how to read and do arithmetic. Mm-hmm. So if you're what civics do you expect? What kind of critical thinking about society do you expect a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old to have? Sorry, I get passionate about this.
No. This is perfect.
No, no. This is good. Let me jump in. And in that same law that Deb is talking about, the Civic Secures Democracy Act, they are saying that a civics education is not traditional American history, free institutions, or Western civilization. They have redefined it as American political thought and history, free institutions, and the impact of American democracy and constitutional democracies globally.
What the
fuck? If they know anything about any of this.
Yes. Okay. Hang on. Wait. Fourth graders are 9 years old. They're 9 years old. You know what I was reading? You know what I was reading in fourth grade? Mrs. Goddamn Piggle Wiggle. Like, that's what you read in fourth grade. It's like Mrs. Piggle Wiggle. And they're talking about, like, what?
I have middle school students that cannot tell you how many continents there are, never mind where they are. So, I mean, you're going to start talking about, international democracies? You don't even know what freaking continents are on the planet. You don't know the names of countries or what hemisphere they're located in. This is so utterly ridiculous. It defies all reason. And that's the problem is people read this and go, I don't know, what's the problem? And I'm like, because you don't know where students are or realistically can be across this nation at fourth grade, it doesn't seem weird to you. But tell me, when you were 9 or 10, could you have told anybody what was in the Bill of Rights? And they're not, and he just pointed out, they don't know what democracy is. The only thing they're going to know about civics or history or democracy or political thought is going to be told to them. And when I say told, I mean literally told. Like, I tell you, you repeat. I tell you, you repeat. That is the definition of indoctrination. That's it. You can't know something. You don't have ability to think critically at that age.
And I would just like to point out, Deb's completely right on. And it's just, they're getting rid of, in this law, the definition for this. They're getting rid of Western civilization. I took Latin and I've been studying Greek for a few years. I'm sorry, but these are pivotal. The philosophies and the ethics behind those, those representative democracies and those republics back then are so important. I don't understand why we would just strike that from the record. This doesn't make any sense.
Okay, so again, I'm gonna come back to my layperson's. Oh no, you're good. You're good. So I want to come back to my lay. No, you're here, Justice. You're here. You're good. Ooh. Can you hear us?
He might not be able to see us.
Oh no, Justice! We lost Justice just when he was in a rant. All right. Well, maybe Justice will figure that out on his end.
I mean, my 11th grader only just read all the foundations of American government, and she's in 11th grade in private, like in homeschool.
Well,
and
this is what I was going to say. Like, so okay. My understanding is that I don't even know if Justice, can you hear us?
Yes, I just got back. It just cut out for a second. It's fine.
Oh,
I know, we're back.
Thank God. Okay. So my understanding of what's going on is right now, so kids have already lost a year of school. Yeah. A lot of kids are behind. Failure rates are at an all-time high across the board. These kids do not know how to read. These kids do not know how to write. These kids do not know how to do math. And now we're going to start integrating an advanced civics curriculum in elementary school.
Yep.
And they're bribing the schools to do it.
Yep. Yeah. For frame of reference, I literally yesterday got hired to teach summer school, or like a summer camp program for middle school kids in ELA, English Language Arts. They will be 6th, 7th, and 8th graders in the population, the so-called underserved at-risk population. Okay. And I was advised to be, to set my sights about 2 grade levels behind for these 6th, 7th, and 8th graders for ELA, and that most of them can't write a paragraph.
Or even know what a paragraph is.
Right. Yeah. And this is not their fault. Okay. Understand that they're perfectly capable. It's just that they haven't had any instruction, and they were already starting behind the 8 ball because the schools suck. So, I'm going to go in and have to teach them. Now, imagine the same population of students facing some kind, in addition to everything else, civics education. When you can't read the material that's put in front of you and you don't understand the vocabulary, there's nothing left but for the teacher to translate it for you. And of course, that's by design. So what's going to end up happening, just as I've seen happen in the last 3 or 4 years with BLM in the classroom and other kinds of curriculum materials like this, is the teachers tell. The teachers lead with leading questions like, so in what ways have white people oppressed Black people? You. But in what ways? These leading questions, they can't think for themselves. Yeah. And they don't read the material.
Well, and this is literally true because for anyone who hasn't seen it, I actually have a video of an 8th grade class on this channel. You can actually just watch the video start to finish of the 8th grade class where the teacher is literally doing this. And this is with 14-year-olds, right? 13, 14-year-olds, where the teacher is saying, you believe what the Pledge of Allegiance says, that everything should be fair and just. Well, if you want justice in the world, then we need to talk about how Black people are treated. And then they watch a video about systemic racism. And then the teacher shows them some gender pay gap nonsense, and they say, well, you want the world to be fair, right? Well, then we need to fix these problems. That's what they do.
And they're doing it to little bitty kids, and they're leading very small children, like kindergarten children, in little chants like no justice, no peace. And when you're a little kid, when you're 7 years old, 8 years old, you do what the grown-ups tell you to do. I mean, they're taking care of you all day. You think this is school. This is what I do. As somebody pointed out on Twitter today, I thought it was brilliant. They said, if your kid can't do math, but they can tell you how what you just said makes you a terrible person, they're in re-education, not education.
Oh my God. That is powerful. That's crazy.
And it's true. There are 4th, 5th, 6th graders who go, Mom, that's a microaggression. You shouldn't say that. That's racist. And you did this and you did that. It's like, okay, tell me what 10 times 15 is or whatever. And they're like, But you're a terrible person.
And then they have to draw all sorts of boxes on a piece of paper that make absolutely no sense, and they still can't figure it out.
Write a paragraph with a topic sentence. Let's go.
Yeah. Wow. All right. I just want to go through some super chats real quick because I don't want to get it back up too much. Jana Zeal says, hell no, not standardized tests. Let's see. I know I saw a couple other ones come in here. Civics is going to be used as a Trojan horse for diversity, inclusion, equity, as well as their interpretation of American history. Is that about right?
No, that's literally
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
And they're not even shy about it in New York State. In New York State, I did a video, you guys, if you want, afterwards, you can go to see the video I put up just yesterday. I took New York State's culturally sensitive whatever it is that they just published that will be approved for final use this month. And I went through it and showed the buzzwords. I'm like, this is literally insane. Like when you see what's in there, they explicitly define diversity. You know what's included now in diversity? Genetic differences. Genetic. It literally has not just gender, not just this, all the 90 million things. And here's the kicker. It says this is not exhaustive. This is not an exhaustive list. We might expand it. And I'm like, it's like this long. It's this long already with all the genetic stuff. And I'm like, genetic, what do we have? Like aliens, mutants, what do we have? X-Men going to school. And then I'm not even kidding you. Inclusion now means also sharing power. It's not just, hi, you're welcome and we're happy to have you and all that. It's also power sharing. It's literally said there. And as far as equity, they actually say we guarantee achievement. Like they're guaranteeing not just access, but I was like, it's an advancement. It's an advancement. So I left out all the middle words and I was like, I guarantee, leave all that stuff. Advancement? Wait, guaranteed? How does that work? So they're putting the quiet parts out loud now, even in the DEI. And what they're saying is straight up out of critical theory. It's so in your face now. They're not even hiding it. And the problem is, and the reason I made the video is that, like, for example, in the Texas school board, that got taken over by more conservative people for good reason. If you've seen the slides of what they were showing their kids, it was child abuse straight up. And they took over the school board. And what does NBC do? Well, these very racist parents, and they were just so afraid of diversity training. They were so afraid of cultural sensitivity training. Yeah. No, that's not what it is. Don't let anyone lie to you and tell you that this is just your garden variety sensitivity training. Not even close. Not even close.
Justice, go ahead.
Oh, no, I want to chime in because I've been dealing with this over the past several weeks. Like, my town does not understand what is going on at all. They think they just hear all these buzzwords and they think it's great. Because here's the problem. Almost all of the Democrats who are in the town offices who work there, they still think this is the party of Kennedy. I had to have almost a full conversation talking about why Kennedy lost in the Senate primary last September to Markey. Well, how is that even possible? Because guess what? This state is not what you think it is anymore. It is not the party of Kennedy. This is not the place where Kennedy grew up anymore. This is a total war zone for this stuff. And just to put into perspective, it's not just about Boston University. Robin DiAngelo used to work and did all of her original stuff, like, I think 30 or 40 miles from my house at the Worcester State, not Worcester State, Westfield State University. She used to work there.
She did.
It all comes back. It all comes back. And then, of course, we have Smith College, which is in Northampton, which is, my state is a disaster. I don't know why I live here sometimes. I'll be honest.
But guys,
say it all the time.
Will welcome you. New Hampshire will welcome you.
This is so important, though. This is so important. I just want to mention this. The stuff we're talking about today about civics and civic security democracy act is very important, and we definitely want to stop it. But guys, they've covered their bases. They've covered their bases. If this thing, all that they're trying to do is amass more money for the exact same cause that's already going into every discipline. And to prove it, if I may, I'm going to just show you a little snippet of that stuff from New York, because this is the kind of stuff that's come out of Berkeley. Okay, you got it? All right.
Got it. Yeah.
So this is what they've got. And I want to hide this. This is junk. I don't want to show that. Okay. So this, well, anyway, New York State guidelines for culturally responsive, sustaining education. Understand that they want this to be in all the subject areas. So this isn't just for like a separate little elective or something. This is the lens through which they're going to look at math, literature, all of it. And then they talk about, this looks pretty good, right? It says rigor, independent learning, sounds fine. And then it says students who are sociopolitically conscious and socioculturally responsive. Why? 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 So, I mean, now we're getting into something like, when did school become when did this become the purpose of it? Okay. And now here's the real kicker. Students who have a critical lens, that's code for critical theory. Critical, they don't mean critical thinking like we heard when we were growing up. Critical means everything I look at, I take apart. Everything I look at, I find fault with it to find what's wrong with it. Okay. Students bring a critical lens to the world as they study historical and contemporary conditions, not after, as of inequity, and learn from historically marginalized voices. Students learn about power and privilege in the context of various communities and are empowered as agents of positive social change. This is it right here. They are using the schools for the explicit purpose of teaching kids how to be activists starting in kindergarten. And then they go all the way down here to like what these all mean. Okay. Recognize personal, cultural, institutionalized discrimination creates and sustains privileges for some while creating Guys, this is going to be in every class. It's not just going to be civics.
Wait. I just want to point this out. Like, this is instead of teaching them to read and write and do math.
This is while doing it. Well,
let's just be honest though. It's instead of.
Yeah.
They don't have anything about all the other things in there. It's just about this.
No. And this is it. And then when you get down, it's even more obvious when you look at this lovely tree. Look at this pretty tree. Now, when I see the words high expectations and rigorous instruction, the next thing, I don't expect to see student-led civic engagement. No, pretty much those two things do not usually go together. No. And then critical examination of power structures, where, I'm sorry, high expectations and rigorous instruction and power structures? Social justice issues? What? Okay. Welcoming and affirming environment, social emotional learning programs. Now, the reason this language is important, social emotional learning programs, is where we talk about how, this is a code for, we need to hear from you. We need to hear from you. You may not abstain from speaking because it's making other people feel unwelcome.
Silence is violence.
Okay. Then all of this stuff about inclusive curriculum and assessment. One of the things that's in here in the document that fed this is that this is being put in place for the purpose of promoting and preserving other cultures and languages. They now see public school as the place where that happens. Not the melting pot anymore. No. Your tribe, his tribe, her tribe, everybody's tribe. They're balkanizing America is what they're doing.
Deb, this is what again? Where
this is New York State. This is called the culturally responsive sustaining educational framework. So this is the framework for all their education. And this was linked to from a document from the New York State Board of Regents that said that in this emergency because of all the things happening this year, and they listed all the media talking points, the brutality of police and the this of that and blah, blah, blah. It was all talking points. We now need to see everything we do. The number one thing is going to be this. Like, this is the framework for all that we do. All of the things have to pass muster through this. This is the lens.
Justice, go ahead.
I would just like to point out, just to add to Carolyn's high blood pressure.
Carolyn's
high blood pressure. Carolyn. You know what? My name gets messed up all the time.
It's okay. I don't even notice most of the time. I'm going to break you of this bad habit, Justice. It's okay.
We're going to break me of the bad habit. We're going to break it. But all of those points that Deb just talked about, the whole students need to be involved in their school government, not their student school government. Their school government, that is an HR 1814, the Civics Secures Democracy Act, and that they have to do student-led civic engagements. So that's in there too. And I think the cultural stuff is in there as well. So it's about to be codified into law. And if nobody else has figured this out yet, HR 1814, it has bipartisan support in the House and the Senate. So I would just like to throw that.
Please write to John Cornyn and tell him to wake up.
Wait. Okay, hang on. I want to go back to that point in a minute. I just want to get a couple super chats in here, though, because I don't want them to get backed up. Patrick says they view Western democracy as an evil system and want to eliminate it and install their own system of communism. That is exactly correct. Metastep says indoctrination in our schools is not new. Look up The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America, which, Deb, I think you've read that and you really like that. Carlin, I hope you do become a libertarian. It's looking more and more like it every day. Also, my grandfather's name was Carlin. My mom-in-law is Carl. Well, they didn't spell it with a K, so not as cool as mine, but that's still pretty awesome. Let me see. I know I have a couple more super chats. Sorry, guys. And I definitely want to get back to how this is like a bipartisan thing now, but I just want to acknowledge everyone that's supporting the channel. Oh, God. I think I've lost some of them. I'll read them off of the screen over here. Let me see. Sorry. Okay, Jeff Horton. Thank you, Jeff. So do you think the people already know about all of this and want it, or do you think the people are just unaware and would nix it if they knew? I think the people are completely unaware that this is going on because the media is not covering it at all. No. I wasn't even aware that this stuff was going on until you guys, who have your heads in this stuff all day, started sounding the alarm bells and saying this is not okay.
Yeah. They don't know. And then to the extent that they know or they've heard, they are actively covering it up. There's a lot of money, too, in play here, you guys. So there's sort of two groups of people. They're the true believers. And then the people who are just grifting the shit out of this. They are making bank. This is a multi-billion-dollar business. And the tragedy is that I don't think they're playing with fire. The people who are just grifting, I don't think they realize the world they're making. It's horrifying.
No, I agree with you. And the grifters bother me on this more than almost any other life form of people. But, okay, Eero Game says, I hope my state, Hawaii, doesn't get any of this money. Post-colonialism and later CRT has been in full swing in education for at least a decade. It's been around longer than that. It's been like 40 years or something at least, right? Am I wrong about that?
Yep. Yeah. It's CRT as a concept, like critical theory, has been around definitely that long. Crenshaw, not Crenshaw, but yeah, that was like late 80s. And then I think the Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack, that's Peggy McIntosh. That was late 80s.
That was late 80s, yeah.
So this is, I saw in graduate school in 1990, they began with this cultural relativism stuff, and we were marginalizing people and colonizing and all this junk. And I remember thinking, like, but they, immigrants came here to become American. But they're rolling it back. And now some people say it's because they're trying to turn us communist. I take issue with that, and it's an unpopular opinion, but I don't think it's that. I think it's just that if you really want to keep a permanent underclass, if you feel that you need to maintain a problem because it serves your political purposes to maintain a problem, or have people have problems like poverty and illiteracy and racial strife and things like that, if that's the coin of the realm in your political world, you're just going to do anything and everything you can to keep that problem going or entrench it further, make it worse. So it's whether or not they want to be communist. I don't see that. I see it being more like China version 2, like 2.0, where we have more of sort of like a fascistic relationship with private enterprise. We have oligarchs keeping it alive in the media, so they're like covering for them. And the rest of us are just the serfs. And what they're running the risk of is they are pushing the serf thing a little too far. And they may end up with Bolsheviks. Like they may end up with a pushback of people at war with each other. And that's where it could get really ugly. This does not have a good outcome.
No.
This does not have a good humanist outcome.
My husband and I started watching the series The Handmaid's Tale from the beginning because the new season just premiered and I didn't remember what happened in season 3, and he had never really watched it anyway. So I was like, we're just going to start at the start. And one of the things, like, it's such a prophet. Like, the book is really good. I actually think the series is really good as well. But one of the things that they said in the season 1, and I think they say this in the book too, is that, when you make things better, that doesn't mean better for everyone. it always means worse for some and better for others. And that I think is exactly what they're trying to build. I don't think that they have any vision of like, oh, this is just communism done the right way, and we're going to do it the right way. I don't think they have that. I think they are trying to grab as much power as they can and do everything to rig the system so that they never ever lose it. And they do not care that that's going to make society worse for some. That is part of the cost of doing business. Am I wrong?
No, but they don't want to own the means of production. They don't really want to own the means of production. I don't believe that. Just like the Chinese don't own the means of production, but they strictly regulate it, and you have to do their bidding at every turn. So they're regulated to the point where if the CEO doesn't do what they tell them, I mean, he could be told to commit suicide. So I see it being more like that than I don't see it being like Stalinism, where the government literally owns everything. And that would be communism. I think it's going to be much more like fascism in that respect. I think they're going to ramp up some wars and use some of the people here to fight those wars, keep us occupied and distracted some more. So it's very dangerous. We are currently at risk, in my opinion, of intellectual and technological takeover. And nobody's paying attention to that because we dumb ourselves down at the risk of that. The Chinese already steal the intellectual property they're stealing and all of that. The technological warfare that's going on is unbelievable. And when we take our population and instead of harnessing the intellect of all of our children and fighting back using that, I don't know what they think they're going to do. I think this wokeness is going to defend us against the Chinese. It's insane. So like I said, I don't think it's communism in the old Stalinist variety of communism. I think it's more the Chinese version of communism, where it's an all-powerful state, but basically moving people around like chess pieces and like the Matrix, like you do this and you do that and you do this and you do that.
Justice, what do you think?
No, I think this is just one gigantic game of Risk. I really think that they are just playing the board on this. I think they see this as a game of Risk or a game of chess. I think this is just, for them, short-term gains and full-level authoritarianism. I don't think this is communism. There's elements, but it's not. I think this is just, it's a control. It's all control. That's just what I believe.
Exactly.
I tend to agree with the two of you. Berkeley, the birthplace and graveyard of free speech. And I kind of chuckled a little bit because, Deb, you were just telling us yesterday that you think that Berkeley is the starting place of all of this crap.
The thing I just showed you, is from Berkeley. In fact, I pulled up on the screen, I went to the Regents thing to try to see where I had seen that, because the definition.
Do you want me to show it again?
Yeah, show the screen, because this is the one from Regents. So this is the one from the New York State Regents that shows like the definitions of diversity. See here where it says like where was it, genetic stuff? Oh God, definitions. Yeah, here it is, genetic information.
Oh my
How messed
God.
up is that? It's so weird. But where they got the definitions from.
Wait, can you go back to that definition? Do they have anything about thought or perspective in diversity?
No.
They have genetic information, but they don't have diversity of thought or.
No.
Wow.
It's all immutable stuff. And like, I don't even want to know how they're going to know what your genetic information is. No, thank you. And then it says, when thinking about diversity, it's important to note that the terminology has broadened over time. They keep dropping little hints that they're going to keep making it bigger. For example, 10 years ago, it was synonymous with racial and ethnic minorities. Today, people once referred to as minorities are now considered part of the global majority.
Oh my God.
So that's why they can't use that anymore. They got to make a new definition. And they're hinting they're going to keep changing it as they need political power. Okay? So, and then the same thing is where they talk about equity. And in here, when they talk about, it's going to be about full participation. And they do talk about power somewhere in here. No, I don't think it's there. Oh, inclusion is where they talk about power. Policy making in a way that shares power and ensures equal access to opportunities and resources. Shares power.
Oh my God.
Right.
Power is a keyword, guys. Anytime you see power, that is critical race theory. That is social justice nonsense.
Right.
That's
But what I was trying to find was where they said somewhere in here where they got the definitions from, or where they got all this from, was from Berkeley.
It was about around that diversity definition. I saw it.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah, it was. It said right above that. It said that they got it from Berkeley.
Yeah. Was it here?
Scroll down a little bit more. There it is. Yep.
It says the definitions listed below can be credited to the University of California, Berkeley Center for Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity, and the University of Houston Center for Diversity and Inclusion. And before we click back off, I just want to quickly show you the list of talking points, that they were using to necessitate all of this. A confluence of events has brought us to this point of reckoning. The senseless, brutal killings of Black and brown men and women at the hands of law enforcement, and ensuing demands for real and enduring racial justice in the face of this inhumanity. I mean, this is the State Board of Regents. This reads like, CNN. Okay? A dangerous spike in violence aimed at Asian Americans. And guess why? Fueled in part by lies that attempt to link the Asian community with the creation and spread of the coronavirus.
I can't even.
Right? So I'm going to stop. But this is New York State Board of Regents, guys.
This is terrifying. This is legitimately terrifying. And I have to say, for me, as just a layperson, I feel so overwhelmed by this behemoth. And it almost feels like what can we even do at this
I don't sleep much.
No, I mean, I literally, so right before this stream, so TMI, right before this stream, I went to the chiropractor because I have had a nagging pain in my hip for 2 months that has not gone away, and I needed to get it fixed and not letting me sleep in any of that. The chiropractor actually told me, he's like, this was caused by your stress level, and you're really pissed off about something. I was like, I'm really pissed off perpetually, all day, every day. It's because of this.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to let you know, in my research that I'm doing sort of professionally, I am looking into also California and Texas. I'm kind of making my way through the big states to sort of learn more about where they are with this stuff. And it took me a solid 45 minutes or so to find the documents for California. So what I'm saying to you is this stuff exists everywhere. So if you go to your district's website or you go into your Board of Education, you're like, I don't see it. I guess that's good, right? And it's not front and center. I don't see it on the homepage, diversity, equity, inclusion. I Googled, or when I looked for it, I didn't see it. You have to look and look and look and look, and then you find it. And then you open it up and you go, oh my God. It's just how much they want to hide it from you, how much they want to put other things in your face before you do the deep dive into it. And most parents barely even know how their district works, never mind how their State Board of Education works.
Deb, is there any sort of resource or website online that links to all of these things for all the different states?
Yeah, my best suggestion is Ballotopedia. Okay. So there's a site that's for voting. I mean, it's basically to educate voters, and it is a clearinghouse of links to just about everything in a state that you'd ever want to know about, because we vote on so many things. And so because we vote on, or, school board elections, and even the people within a state will vote for various positions in education, you can often find the breakdown of that stuff through Ballotopedia. That can be a starting point for you, at least to find your school board's own website and so forth, and you can drill down from there. That's one place you can start. There is another website. I'll go find it. You guys talk. I'm going to find this other one for you too. That's good.
Okay.
Yeah. Justice, what do you have to add here?
Yep. What I have to add is that even if your state boards of education are not including this, most likely some of you have DEI subcommittees on your school boards. And the problem is that they can sound all nice and dandy, and some of them are probably perfectly fine. But here's the problem. The ones that you can't see their meeting minutes for, where they're violating the sunshine laws or the open meeting laws, those are the ones you need to fear the most, because they are doing this stuff behind the scenes. They're doing it with students. Some of these committees have students. They have teachers and faculty on them, and they always have 1 or 2 board members. So that way, and that would constitute a quorum. So if you don't understand what that means, it means if you have enough people in a room that could vote on a motion, you have to have it at a public meeting. You can't talk about the topic, wherever the heck you want. So, but there's no meeting minutes on it. We don't know what they're voting on. We don't know what their motion's on. We don't know.
And
what
that's illegal, by the way. That's illegal.
It's very illegal.
Every single state, everybody watching this needs to know this. This is super important. Sunshine laws apply in every single state. Now, that means it has to be publicized when they're having meetings. Now, the only thing you need to know is what is the definition of meeting in your state? Because believe it or not, in some states, any gathering of the people you elected to do something, is considered a meeting. Like they can't have a quorum and go, oh, it wasn't really a meeting. It was a retreat. They have to explain if they're doing a separate retreat that they're not going to publish minutes for. They have to say what it was for, et cetera, because they're spending your money and they're meeting. They cannot use a retreat to have public business. They can't conduct public business. So anytime there's a quorum in most states, that's called a meeting. And some, it's even less than that, that's called a meeting. So know your definition of meeting in your state and understand that sunshine laws mandate, and they have to, if they don't provide you access to the minutes and don't tell you what a closed door executive session was about and why you couldn't be there, either virtually or in person, they're violating the law.
All right. Fantastic. David Skidmore says, I thought creating independent thinking was a good purpose. I guess I'm an old fogey. This is truly scary. Yeah, we don't do independent thinking anymore. That's for sure. Let me see. Okay, hang on. I got to go back to the super chats on the other screen. Andrea Parsons says, the elites in New York all send their kids to private schools. They don't give a flying flip if the middle class have to deal with this hogwash. Well, the thing is, and what people really need to understand, it's is not just going on in the public schools. This is going on in the private schools. This is going on in the charter schools. I mean, we had this big scandal with Dalton in New York City, which is one of like the preeminent elite private schools of the private schools.
And Brearley and Grace Church, and Paul Rossi has been told don't set foot on the premises now because he wrote a letter and put it in Barry Weiss's Substack about what's going on there, and it's horrific. He recorded his director saying, yes, I know we're demonizing the white children. And the director, the head of Riverdale Country Day School in New York, I think it was Riverdale, said, I don't care if you parents don't like it. We're doing it. Take your child elsewhere if you don't like it. Like, that's how confident Glenn Lowry and John McWhorter were just talking about this yesterday. You can go check on their blogging heads or whatever. They talked about how this guy was so bold and didn't care that he basically told people, if you don't like it, shoo.
Yeah, because he has a list of kids a mile long that parents that want to send their kids to that school. He does not care. He's going to lose nothing. Yep. Justice, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say the largest school district area, which James Lindsay has been beating his drum on. He beats it a little bit sometimes, but Lowell High School, they're having issues too. They have been discriminating against Asian American citizens, and has not popped up on the news very often, but it's becoming very interesting. I haven't paid as much attention to over there, but it's bad.
Check out Newton. Check out the Newton schools going back a decade.
I'm trying not to think about it. I'm really trying. You go back,
Newton School, the Newton School District was a very posh public school district outside of Boston, has been like notorious for this stuff for at least a decade.
Man.
Yeah.
All right. I've given up on catching up with the super chats for right this second because they've already gotten out of control. Thank you guys for the support. I promise I'm going to read all the super chats before the stream is over. But I want to make sure before I forget, I want to go back to this question of this has bipartisan support. Why in the ever-loving hell is there a single Republican supporting this? And I would ask why the hell are any Democrats supporting it too? But we already know the answer to that question. They're a lost party. That is not going to change. What is going on with the Republican Party?
Well, it's one person, really. So, I mean, as far as I know, it's John Cornyn. No, is it also Ted Cruz?
No. So there are two co-sponsors that are Republicans. One of them is John Cornyn in the Senate, but it hasn't gotten to the Senate yet. The other one is from the 4th Congressional District in Oklahoma, Tom Cole, who has also introduced it in the House. Yes, that's where it started. And What's worse is that the reason why we're probably not going to be able to get them to change anything is that Congress doesn't not pass education spending bills because you can easily, no matter what it is, twist it politically and make it look like, well, you're not educating the children. You don't care about the kids. You don't want to spend money on the kids. We're playing a dead man's game now. This isn't a matter of if this is going to happen. This is a matter of when does this nuclear bomb explode, because it's already descending on us.
That's right. That's right. And I mean, I chalk it up to they're just clueless. They're stupid. I mean, and nobody wants to say that, but we elect people who really aren't the brightest bulbs in the shed. They're really not. I'm sure they hear civics and they go, America, like civics, cool. They're going to learn about civics. They're going to learn about America. No, they're not. This is what the woke do. They take words that sound good. Even diversity sounds pretty good. Even equity sounds pretty good. Some of these words, really, when you look at their actual true meanings, are really not bad words. But when you twist them around to mean something completely different and keep doing it as you need to, then suddenly you have to keep up with it. Like I'm having to read this stuff daily. Like I can't let up for a day because they've changed the definition of something already, or they've moved it around, or they've called it something different. And you'll have somebody, it's called a Mott and Bailey, where they tell you like, no, it's just, sensitivity training, really, like when you criticize them. Then when you turn your back for a second, it's like, we're going to talk about whiteness and the whiteness is bad, blah, blah. It's like, wait, so you are racist? No, it's just sensitivity training. They do that. They keep going back and forth so that you look like an idiot.
And this is what James Lindsay has actually been pointing out the last couple of days on Twitter, because there's been this whole rash on Twitter of like these critical race theorists coming out and being like, James Lindsay just doesn't understand critical theory and he has the definition wrong. And I don't know why these people are talking about it when they don't even know what they're talking about. And what James Lindsay says is like, when they're saying that you're getting the definition wrong, it's just because they're trying to deflect and change the subject and make you believe that it's something that it's not.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And we don't have a press anymore.
No, we don't. I feel like it's projection, because I feel like those people don't even know what their own definitions for their own, what they're peddling is. They have no idea. They literally are just projecting. They're just, a projector is their spirit animal. That is how I would put it.
Well, other thing that people need to understand is that they keep using, when we use the term critical race theory, we're giving them far too much credit. There are requirements for something to even be a theory. And this is what gets me so angry is they claim that, their theory or critical social justice theory, whatever you want to call it, is a theory. And it's not a theory. It's more of a model. A model is like a rough sketch that anyone can make. Okay. It's a device for testing a hypothesis. And when a model then gives you stable results over a number of tests. So in other words, to apply to critical race theory, they say that a disparate outcome is evidence of racism. Well, they'd have to come up with a test, and they'd have to be able to come up with stable results of that test to formulate the hypothesis that racism is causing these disparities. They've done away with all that. They don't even bother to get their hands dirty, and they go, oh, look, disparity, racism. That's barely even a model, never mind a theory, because you don't get to call something a theory till you have so many stable tests and you have a hypothesis. And then when the body of evidence to support your hypothesis builds, now you have a theory. That's why we have gravity, evolution. That's why we call them theories, not because it's like a hunch. I kind of think that maybe we evolved. No, it's because we've had enough evidence that has mounted over time that now we call it a theory. A theory doesn't mean something that we just conjecture, but that's what critical race theory is. Critical race theory is literally somebody's hunch.
No.
That's it.
It's true. All right. So okay.
Are you exhausted yet?
I am exhausted. I am overwhelmed. I am a little bit black-pilled, I have to say. What can people... Okay, so now we know that we're totally bonked. Let's just be honest. And I think that justice, put it the best way. It's like, there's nothing that we can do to stop this. It's going to pass. It is 100%
probably
going to pass. This is going to come into fruition. There is nothing that can be done about it. What do we do? I have what do we do? What do average people do?
You do what justice is doing.
Well,
Go ahead, Justice.
yes, you run for school committee. That's step one, but most school committees are already happening right now, so I have to work and make sure I get elected. But under some of these new regulations, these are being done under a statute known as the National Activities. I mentioned it already. Its citation is 20 USC 6663. Now, in that citation is an actual definition that's important. It's called, well, not a definition board that has a definition later in, a similar statute called evidence-based strategies. I am hoping that and evidence-based strategies means things that have statistical significance or indicate statistical significance. And they have guidelines for it. And obviously something that has a positive impact that is totally peer-reviewed is the top tier level of what you would need. Low level is you think this could help, so we're going to do it, but you have to keep testing to see if it has positive outcomes as you go along to see if you can keep doing it. Obviously, if you're doing something with a bunch of kids and it has a negative impact, you terminate the program. So under what the Department of Education is doing, when they pass this, I should be appropriate here, when they pass this, I am hoping, because the statute has never been challenged, that we challenge them based on principled arguments and peer-reviewed research that this type of diversity training doesn't work, and we bring this to court immediately.
Correct.
We have to bring it to court. And this is the only statute where it will work. In HR 1814, there is another word that they have redefined, that they have a definition for, called evidence-based practices. All it means is basically the best indoctrination techniques. Everything in HR 1814 can't be stopped, but whatever they're doing in HR 400 and in this new regulation goes under this statute. The statute for the definition of evidence-based strategies is 20 USC 7801 21A. So if anybody wants to look that up, I have a video on it that you can watch. I talk about that definition and the regulations over it and the definitions over it. But I think that's the best way to go after them as soon as this passes. And I think that's one of the ways that, however it comes up, whatever, if Jody's situation in Massachusetts goes up to the Supreme Court, if Gabrielle's goes up, they have to bring this up at some point. This has to get brought up in some sort of sense. I think this is the only way. I think this legal definition is our only hope.
Yeah, and I will say that so I will say, I know the organization that was helping Gabrielle. I'm not sure how they're involved now with her case, but Gabrielle Clark, guys, is the mom in Nevada that's suing her son's school over them basically forcing her son to say he was an oppressor in order to graduate. But there was an organization called Schoolhouse Rights that was working with her, and I know for an absolute fact that they are looking for other cases like this around the country. I know they're specifically looking.
Chris Rufo's soliciting cases too.
Yeah, Chris Rufo is as well. So if you got we need brave people who are going to step up to the plate and challenge this legally. This is the only way this stops. Is I think sometimes we can get a brief reprieve when we're doing legislation like the critical race theory bill that passed in Idaho, that hopefully passed in Oklahoma, hopefully in New Hampshire at some point. It's not dead yet.
Have you seen me harassing him? Have you seen me harassing Jed?
I have seen everyone harassing everyone, and I think it's fabulous.
Nicely, civilly, but
well, we have to be appropriate. But I also think at the end of the day, this needs to be struck down by the courts. That is the only solution to this, is when it starts getting struck down by the courts.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, to Justice's point, though, if you guys, if somebody does go to court, or even when you're in your arguments with people about this, let's say you're at your school board meeting or you're talking to your local politician or something, it is so important that you try to leave the politics at the door. Don't drop words like Marxism in there, et cetera. And so forth. You've got to stop doing that, because they just turn off. Instead, you have to refer to things like the Civil Rights Act of 1964. You have to talk about anti-discrimination. You have to talk about segregation. You have to talk about compelled speech. You have to talk about all of the actions in practice. What critical race theory sounds like gobbledygook to people. What you have to talk about is how this renders in the classroom. And the way it renders in the classroom is discrimination, segregation, compelled speech, and verbal abuse, all of which are explicitly illegal in the United States of America, even for adults, okay? But with tax dollars, whether you're an adult or a child. And now when you're talking about children, you are also getting into issues of child abuse, child verbal abuse, and violation of parental rights when they do things like tell the child to identify your gender and your gender expression and your sexual identity. This is already in violation of a Supreme Court ruling that said these are grooming behaviors, and it is not allowed for a school to question your minor child about their sexuality, their sexual identity, their gender expression. This is violating parental rights and the child's privacy. And yet they're doing it every single day. So I could bet you that if parents were paying attention to just the basic lessons going on in their kids' class, they'd already have a lawsuit just on the basis of that alone. Never mind critical race theory, because they're getting all up in their business and it's illegal. So stick to the principled things that they are doing that is wrong, and you'll break them.
Justice, what do you have to add?
What I have to add is also it's a violation of your other basic civil rights as well, and other civil rights violations. They're making children, declare whether or not, they're gay or straight, they're bisexual, whether they're trans or not. They're making them do that, which is incredibly dangerous. It's one thing if the parents know and, they have those private conversations. It's another thing to actually violate someone's privacy, which is not explicit in the Constitution, but is heavily implied all over the place and through precedent. It is illegal. It is completely disgusting. And I don't understand how this has made it this far, that we have allowed it to get to that point. But there's another point. This is more of a ticking time bomb in the courts than we realize, because when this regulation passes, it has the force of law, obviously, as well as all of these laws that are about to go through Congress. Once that happens, if other court cases make it to the Supreme Court or to the district courts before Jody or, Gabs or, whatever happens in New Hampshire, I kind of hope New Hampshire gets sued as soon as they pass HB 544, because if that doesn't happen and if somebody else beats us, they could set a new precedent. And we all know how the originalists are. They love their precedent. We will never be able to fix this.
Yeah,
it's a race to the courthouse. It is literally a race to Washington right now.
Yep. And they also want to stack the court.
Well, that's a different issue for a different day. But no, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, the critical race theory laws, they need to be challenged in court. Like, we want them to be challenged in court because, like, that's the only way that this is actually going to die. Right. Is if it goes to the Supreme Court. And I want to emphasize something that Deb said too, because I really agree with this point. And Chris Rufo actually talks about this. You need to give concrete examples when you're fighting back. This is what's going on. This is why I always lead with examples now. Like they had to do white fragility training in the Manchester schools, and UNH, they're telling their white employees to shut up and just accept this ideology. You have to give concrete examples. You cannot lead with this is a Marxist ideology, because I'm sorry, guys, it may be true, but it sounds crazy. It sounds crazy and it sounds conspiratorial, and it's not going to do anything.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Justice, go ahead. I love how Justice raises his hand like he's in school.
Yeah, I know. I'm used to it because of being on committee and stuff. I'm used to that. But one thing that I wanted to mention is that one of the people in the locals group that we're in, Adrian, actually did a great video on her channel where she actually brings up peer-reviewed research, a document that connects a bunch of peer-reviewed research that shows that mandatory diversity training makes things worse. I think at several different levels, whether it's college or whether in the workplace or whether at, the high school level, it doesn't work. Those are statistically significant studies that we can use to challenge these people. This is admissible in a court of law. These are peer-reviewed. These are published studies. This is completely doable. It's not like this information doesn't exist. The burden of proof is on those people who are teaching these kids this stuff, critical race theory, because they don't have any evidence. It's all just, well, we think this will work because it sounds pretty and nice. Like, that doesn't hold up in court.
Well, and the thing is that, it doesn't work. And they'll come back at you with, it's a freedom of speech issue. This is what they're facing in New Hampshire. Oh, but it's our freedom of speech. Nicole Hannah-Jones was on the news the other day. This is a freedom of speech issue. No, it is not. It is not a freedom of speech issue. You do not have a right to go into a school and preach ideology. And that's the only time and the only place that you should even mention anything about ideology, because when you are talking about things that are not evidence-based or proven in fact or things like that, where it's opinion, and 1619 Project is opinion, so is critical race theory, that all of these outcomes are the result of racism or systemic racism. That's an opinion. That is not established scientific fact. It's not even social scientific fact. And to tell young children this as if this is the only way, this is the answer to everything, is you might as well go in and teach the Bible as if it's fact. And no, you do not have a freedom of speech. You can teach about Marxism in the school. You can't teach Marxism in the school. You can teach about critical race theory. You cannot teach it as fact. That you cannot do. You don't have a right to do that.
And in fact, the bill in New Hampshire actually explicitly has a line, and I'll be talking about this in my next live stream that I'm going to do in about an hour at 5:30. But there is actually a specific provision in the bill in New Hampshire that says you can teach all of these things. You just can't teach it as though it is fact, and you cannot exclude other perspectives, and you cannot eliminate dissent from the discussion. You can say some people believe that critical race theory is true. Some people also believe that it's absolute hogwash that has no evidence. And you give the students the information and you teach them to think critically, to deduce for themselves what they think. And I want to make one final point on this, in that it is violating the First Amendment to put people through this type of training, whether they're adults or children, because you are compelling their speech. The state does not have constitutional protections. The people have constitutional protections.
Correct.
So when we're talking about things like training being done in state agencies or being paid for by your tax dollars, the state does not have constitutional protection. Individuals do. And so there is no way to make a cohesive argument around free speech being violated when you're talking about the rights of the state, not the individual.
Correct.
Justice, go ahead. Go ahead.
And I just wanted to point out what those, I'm going to say what those Supreme Court cases are, because this is really important. I think people need to know what these are. One of the Supreme Court cases is 319 U.S. 624. It's West Virginia State Board of Education versus Barnett. That is the one that says that, students have, that is the compelled speech case in the Supreme Court. It's the underlying one. That's the important one. 38.5 U.S. 589, Kaishi and Board of Regents. That one says that the state can tell any government employee, including a teacher, that you must teach the way that we tell you, or say what we tell you to do, because you are a government official. Your free speech rights are gone, because we as the state have the right to act through you. So teachers are not excluded from that. They are government officials. So pay attention to that. And then again, 20 U.S.C. 7801 21A is the definition for evidence-based strategies. They can't do this without statistical significances that are positive, that have positive effects on the students. It's that simple. Those are the three arguments. Two of them have to do with free speech. One of them has to do with an actual legal definition in law that hasn't been challenged in statute. I just don't understand why people aren't arguing with this. I really don't.
Because they argue with emotions. All right, guys, I want to make sure we get into some super chats, because I have to go in about half an hour, and we've had such a great discussion, but I just want to make sure that we're giving everyone in here. Let's see. Alexandra Martin says, honestly, everyone who needs to know that, who knows about this needs to speak up. At this point, silence is violence to the American way of life. Fun fact, one of my BLM protest signs was white silence is violence. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with this. I think that at this point, if people are not speaking up, they're doing the rest of us a disservice, to be very honest. And I know that it is scary to speak up. And I know that believe me, there are a few people who know better than me that there are consequences to speaking up. But the reality is this: if everyone that was against this spoke up today and said, no, we're not doing this anymore,
we outnumber them.
Mm-hmm. We outnumber them dramatically.
We do.
It would be over in an instant. But people have to make the choice to speak up.
Carlin, can I offer up a tool that people could use as sort of like a primer? They could even print it out and carry it around.
Oh, sure.
Well, it references the case that Justice just mentioned. It references it a bunch. And that is a piece by Greg Lukianoff. This is in Fire. And there are a couple other things after this as well, because he's got a few others. But this is the one that has 10 principles. When we talked about principled arguments, the Empowering of the American Mind beta version, 10 principles for opposing, thought reforming, in K-12. And in this, he goes through the no compelled speech, thought or belief, and he talks about the court case. He talks about respect for individuality, dissent, and sanctity of the conscience. Also West Virginia versus Barnett. Principle 3, teachers, administrators must demonstrate epistemic humility. Sweezy versus New Hampshire. So this thing he quotes Learned Hand, Supreme Court Justice. This takes you through and gives you these things. Now, the one that breaks my heart the most, and I know it will touch you, Carlin, as well, because you're a psychologist, is this one, principle number 6. Do not teach children to think in cognitive distortions. This is critical race theory in a nutshell. This is what it teaches. This is abuse. This is literally psychological and emotional abuse of anyone, but especially an impressionable child who does not have their boundaries formed yet. They're trusting the adults to take care of them emotionally, intellectually, and physically. And when you do this to a person, this can lead you down a path to permanent disability in terms of mental health. So this is absolutely devastating, and it is still a principled argument. These can be identified in the specific examples that Carlin cited as being part of the lessons. And then, of course, the great untruths that he has, like untruth of fragility, what doesn't kill you makes you weaker, all this microaggression stuff and all these. So definitely go find this article. This is on Fire. This website is a great one for finding out about free speech and education. And this specific article, The Empowering of the American Mind, beta version 10 Principles for Opposing Thought Reform in K-12.
Excellent. Thank you, Deb, for that resource. We appreciate that. All right, let's see. DG says, love your insight, Carlin and group. Thank you for that. Kirno says, these nutheads associating genetics and power is the CRT equivalent of the alt-right, and how they associate IQ with race and genetics. This is crazy. That is exactly right. These people are extremists. This is a fringe ideology. This is not real. This has been created by people who have made it up in order to do a power grab. Atras or Onus says, any way for childless people to get involved? How can childless people get involved?
Homeschool. No, okay. I mean, well, help out.
No, not just. Yes. First of all, run for your school committees. Don't even, it doesn't matter if you have kids or not, just run. At least you're on it gives the parents something other to talk about or to choose as a selection. Also, you have a right as a taxpayer to show up at your school committee meetings and say something with public comment. You can show up. All of the childless people can show up. You all get to vote. This is your tax money. This is not, they call it free cash. They call it Chapter 70 funds. They call it SO2 funds. It's not. This is your taxpayer dollars. Deb says it on her channel too. This is your taxpayer money. Show up. You outnumber some of these people. I've had to tell my town several times already, in the past 24 hours since a huge thing just blew up not for me, but for somebody else. Somebody else is also trying to run in as a write-in. They are horribly failing in that regard. But that's beside the point. I'm having to explain to them, you are the majority. Even those of you who are independents and who are conservatives are the majority of parents. These are 4 people making these decisions who are influencing the school board. This is ridiculous. If everybody in my town spoke up, we wouldn't have this issue. If everybody ran for office, we wouldn't have this issue. That's the ultimate reality. And this is how ridiculous the situation is. We shouldn't be having these fights in my town of Templeton or in the town of Phillipston because we voted for overwhelmingly by over 5 and 7 points in this town. There's no reason for this. We outnumber them. And all the Biden people aren't happy either. They don't like what's happening. You are the majority. Get it in your head. Yeah. In your head. You are the majority. Stand up. You can win.
You have to act like it, though. You have to act like you are in the majority. You have to act like you're right. You have to stop skulking around in the shadows and having these secret conversations. We have to start acting like we actually have the numbers because the fact of the matter is we do.
Exactly.
Man. All right. Couple more super chats. Sean H says, look up GARE, big consulting agency pushing this stuff. You can see the government agencies that have signed on. Yeah, guys, there are a lot of organizations that are making a lot of money on this crap right now. A lot, and it's disgusting. Guitar Studio, thank you for the super chat. Jenny's getting inky with it, says it's a way to control the conversation. You think you're having an honest one, and then they just gaslight you. Stand your ground. And I think this is really important too, because they are not playing by the same rules as us. They're not. And we keep going into these conversations treating it like an honest conversation, but it is not. We are not playing on a level playing field. We are not playing by the same rules. Can you guys speak to that idea?
Well, as I mentioned before, they use the Mott and Bailey all the time. Mott and Bailey is a standard thing. When you guys read Rules for Radicals, you'll see they use that all the time. It's basically like, when I'm telling the truth about what I intend, I give the explicit stuff that sounds crazy. But then as soon as you call me on it or say, hey, wait a second, that's nuts. And you go, oh, no, you just really don't understand. And they're very careful with how they do it. And the way they're using the media to do it is they'll go and say the things they really mean. They'll sort of test market it out on like Twitter, or they'll say it off, at a small venue, like one person will say it, right? And they won't call it critical race theory. They'll just say, we need to do X, or people are this, or whatever. They'll say the truth, the quiet part out loud. Then when it's identified by somebody else as that's critical race theory, or they're saying we need to get this out of the school, they go on a major news network, or they go in front of people and they're like, oh, I'm so reasonable and upstanding and above board. And no, it's nothing like that at all. So they play on social pressure, social stigma. It's all emotional reasoning. And the reason it feels so dysregulating is that even the most rational person on planet Earth is still driven by emotion and wanting to fit in and not wanting to be an outlier. So by using these major news networks and the big three, the big four, they create the impression that they're in the majority, that you're the outlier, not them, that they're reasonable and maybe there's something wrong with you. And it's gaslighting and it's abuse, and you need to just disregard. If you know you're right in principle, stand that ground. They're playing games with you. Picture every bad person who's ever done it. Joseph Goebbels, Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, all these guys. It's just the modern version. It's hard to accept, but it's true.
Well, and because you mentioned it, Deb, I'm going to do a little bit of a shameless plug and talk about how we are actually doing Rules for Radicals in our book club in my locals community, which the link, if you guys want to join, is right down below. So as a special perk, and I literally just said this on Twitter as a joke before we started live streaming, if you sign up for an annuals membership in my locals, not only do you get 2 free months, but you also are going to get entered into a drawing to get a hand knit garment from me of some sort that we'll collaborate on together. But most importantly, you do get access to the Rules for Radical book club that I'm going to be doing on May 23rd, because we need to understand their playbook if we're going to fight back. All right, shameless plug over. Justice, any thoughts on that point of not playing by the same rules that they are?
So what we have to understand is that they are, what Congress and what the Biden administration is doing, it's not just child abuse what they're proposing. This is predatory. This is completely predatory. Let's just call it as it is. They are not just lurking in the shadows. They're going to throw this at your children. They're going to manipulate them. They're going to gaslight them. They're going to keep spinning them into a frenzy until they accept it. And it's just one of the most disgusting things I think we could ever understand. And when it comes to this is that we have to understand that they are going to manipulate us, that they're going to say whatever they want. The goal of the matter is just keep standing up and don't stand down to them. Don't just start blocking people if you're running for a campaign, because that's not going well for the woke person that is doing that. In my situation right now, they are dramatically, for those of you who don't understand, I'm running for 2 seats. There's 2 seats up. I'm running for one of them. I have to get third in order to lose, but I'm the only person on the ballot. There's somebody who is a write-in who is clearly okay with this stuff, and some people that I inspired to be like, hey, like, you are the majority. You can go and ask questions and understand what's going on. Asked her questions, and she just started blocking people who she didn't like. And she even upset town leadership with one of the people on one of the most powerful committees. So this is not, let's just say that it's not playing out well for her in this election. Hopefully, as long as we get somebody else to go again. But that's beside the point. You have to stand up for these people. You have to stand up for yourself, not for them. You have to stand up for yourself. And as long as you just keep headstrong and moving forward through their pile of feces, you'll get through it, because it's a pile of feces. It's not a brick wall. Just walk through it. It smells awful, but just walk right through it.
And you said something really interesting there, and I don't want to gloss this over. We've been talking about how get on your school committee, run for these things. You don't have to have kids in school to do this stuff. You are the only person running on the ballot for 2 seats. You're going to get on this school committee. And and all you did was raise your hand and said, I can do this. And more people need to do that sort of thing, because it's not like there's a plethora of people that are running for school committee. You're basically going to either have people like us that are opposing this crap, or you're going to have people like them that are supporting it. There's not going to be any middle ground of people running for school committee right now. So what do you want? Do you want the people that are supporting it to take over, or do you want to be part of the people that are beating this idea back?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And one last super chat, Z Guardian, just thank you for that support, because there's no comment in there. All right, guys. So if you want to follow along with Deb and Justice, first off, I really want to say thank you to both of you for explaining this situation and giving us more detail. And it's even more frightening than I had anticipated coming into this stream. So thank you for giving me nightmares that I'll inevitably have tonight. That's all right. But guys, I want to just so strongly encourage you to make sure that you're following along with what Deb and Justice are doing, because they both talk about this in much greater depth than we're able to today. I've got both of their YouTube channels in the description below. Please go and subscribe. Please keep up with what they're doing. They're sounding the alarm bells when not a lot of people out there are. And as painful as it is, we all need to understand what is going on if we're going to fight back. Deb, any final comments from you?
The only thing I will say is that, I know it sounds like a terrible thing to say, but I don't believe the schools can be reformed. That doesn't mean don't fight back. We have to fight back, because not every kid can be protected. But if you have a child and they're in this school, really seriously consider your options. I urge you, it is, don't think of homeschool as like, I got to quit my job and stay home and all this kind of stuff. In my locals community, I offer help to people who are trying to explore their options. It has exploded now. In the last year, there are more and more people leaving the schools and figuring it out and all that. So I urge you, don't let your child be a science experiment. While we're waiting for all this to occur, they're not learning. It's even if we removed all the CRT from the classroom, they still are. They're not teaching them to read. They're not. Part of why they're using CRT is to cover up for their failure to teach them basic skills. That's why it's so appealing. Yeah. So please consider options. I'll help you if I can. I really will. I want to help as many people as I can. And but please consider it for your kids.
Absolutely. And Justice, how about you? Any final thoughts?
My final thoughts are this: figure out who's running against. We're not hiding. People like me are not hiding. We're going out there and saying this stuff is bad. Support those people when they finally get sworn in, when they finally get elected. Show up to those school committee meetings and back them up. Be that group in the crowd that boos when the school committee decides to do stuff like this. They have no right to do what they're doing right now. They have no authority to. They're not just playing with fire. They're playing God with all of these children in the most predacious way possible. And again, just run for different things. Run even for select board, because they also do a lot of different stuff in town, and you have a select board. Run for them as well. Run for your different committees. Just run. Get some power back. The only reason why these people have power is because they took positions nobody else wanted. Like, who wants to be in capital planning committee? Nobody. I did. I joined, and then I decided to run for school committee. Guess what? It's not that difficult. Like, all of your towns have open positions, whether you like it or not. Nobody likes to do this stuff. So just do it, and have conversations with people who are level-headed with you, because in open meeting law, at least in Massachusetts, we can talk with one other member. It's if you're in a group of 3 or more that you can't talk with people. So I can talk one-on-one with a fellow committee member and be like, hey, are you okay? Like, what's your sanity level on this? Like, how you doing? Like, off and on. Have those connections with people if you are running for different committees and stuff. you'll bring a partner with you. You know what I always say when you go and, when you comment to the Department of Education, when you contact a senator, bring a friend with you. Always bring a friend with you when you go on to stuff. It's one of the most important things. So that way you have a sanity check as you go up against this. Because I think one of the, issues that people are running into, and Jody Shaw has been saying it on her Twitter recently to, several different people, is that, she's experiencing, different mental health issues because she's going up against her employer. I mean, her former employer. It's a very big situation that we're dealing with. I'm in a better position than most at the moment because I'm not going up against, an employer. I mean,
She needs an asshole whisperer.
I will.
Yeah.
I call it the asshole whisperer. That's you bring someone with you and they make sure you're being gaslit.
Yeah. But I think that's just the best way to do it. Bring a friend with you, make sure that you have friends that go to your meetings and watch and that defend you. I think that's just power in numbers, and we have the numbers. I mean, especially in a lot of these rural towns, we have the numbers. There's no reason this shouldn't be outlawed. I know Hillsborough County in New Hampshire just outlawed this, but this needs to happen more frequently.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And Jenny's getting inky with it, has one last suggestion. As mentioned earlier, teach your kids cursive. They need to be able to read the founding documents themselves. Don't make them illiterate. I completely agree. And I want to add one final thought here. And it's just, I've said it before and I say it all the time, but people have got to start speaking up. They really, really do. Guys, if you're not speaking up now, it's going to be too late by the time you do. And I understand that it's scary, and I understand too that when you're on the outside looking in, it can feel like I'm just one person. What can I really do? What is me speaking up going to mean? Well, let me tell you this. I was in a room a couple of weeks ago with Chris Rufo and Dave Rubin and Peter Boghossian and all sorts of people. And one of the things that we talked about was that every single person that is fighting back against critical race theory right now is connected to someone in this room by 1 degree. That is how small the community is that is actively fighting back against this stuff. And here's what I know from, being in this for a good year now, is that people will have your back. If you start speaking up, you will have support in this community. They will have your back. They will crowdfund for you. They will help you. They will help be that sanity check, all this stuff. So you have got to start speaking up. Make sure you get on someone's radar. I talk to Jody Shaw once a week. I talk to Aaron from UVM all the time. We have each other's backs. We support each other, but you have to take the first step and no one can do it for you. All right. Okay. Well, folks, I have another live stream in about 40 minutes. Diablo69, Carlin, you have 40 minutes till your next video. Are you allowed to do live reactions? So my next live stream is actually, I wasn't planning on doing 2 live streams today until the state representative who introduced the CRT bill in New Hampshire, Keith Ammon, called me earlier today. And he said, Carlin, I was just on New Hampshire Public Radio and it was a total hit job. And he just wanted to commiserate. But I was like, Keith, I got you. So at about 5:30, I'm going to take a little break, and then we are going to do a live reaction to today's sham episode of The Exchange on NHPR, and I will point out every single spot in which they lied to the public using the actual document and pointing out where they are incorrect about everything. Because when they hit us, we need to hit back. So, and, as it turns out, I actually have more subs on my channel than they have viewers or listeners. So, hey, I feel pretty good about that. So, that's going to be happening in about 40 minutes at 5:30 p.m. I'm going to take a little rest. Justice, Deb, thank you so much for coming on again. You both are welcome to come back anytime. Please subscribe to their channels. Justice, do you have a locals community? I know Deb has a locals.
No, I do.
No, Justice, just saying out of my locals.
Twitter and I just have my Twitter and I just have my Twitter and my YouTube, so you can just go to those because I will be I will, as much as I can do. Once I get elected, I won't be able to talk about certain things, but I will be watching every other department in the state. I will be watching every other department in the federal government, what they're doing. I'm not going to let up for 1 minute. Just because I might not be able to talk about certain things in education doesn't mean the transportation department isn't off of my radar. I would just like to throw that out there.
Excellent. And of course, Deb and Justice are both part of my locals community, and we will be reading Rules for Radicals in the next couple weeks. So we invite you to all come join us. The information is in the description below. All right, guys, I'm going to take a break for now, but we'll see you in about 40 minutes at 5:30 to do it all again. All right, guys, take care. See you soon.